Hey guys, welcome to the She Knows Arsenal post-match show for the North London derby. Well, what can I say? North London is still red, Jose Mourinho still sucks, and Harry is dirty. So let's go ahead and get started. Hey guys, so what can I say? We won the North London derby. I was not 100% sure that we were going to win it, but I did think it would be close. And wonderful performance from the team. I think we have so many good talking points for this game. And I'm just happy to be talking to this particular panel for a win. I'm not sure if I've had them on when we have won a game. So this is going to be a good show. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce my panel now. And we have John from 305 Cast. Hey, John. You're muted.
Great start. So yeah, thanks for having me on. It's good to be here after a win. I know that the mood would have been way different, a lot of rationalization going on if we had lost, and a lot of anger. So we're here to talk about a good win and some interesting stuff that happened in a very, I would say, interesting match. So thank you for having me on again.
Of course. And I also have DJ Harry from the internet. From London.
Yeah. From London.
All right. And how are you feeling, Harry, after the win yesterday?
Yeah, I'm good. I feel a little bit emotionally tired, slightly hungover because I needed to rely on an external friend to get me through the game. But I feel good. And yeah, like John said, just happy it's over and happy we won. Delighted we won.
100%. You know, I think that, I don't know if there was I don't know if you guys were confident or not, but for me, I just thought it was going to be a close game. You know, I don't think we're the same team that we were when we lost to them in December. We've really progressed leaps and bounds since then. But I have to say that in the US in particular, the commentary was pretty one-sided, very lopsided. It was almost like wait, hold on. Okay. I'm like looking at the private chat and trying to talk at the same time. So no, it's fine. I can't walk and chew gum at the same time. It's really sad. So basically the US commentary was very unbalanced and one-sided. And it was as though Spurs were so good and we were so bad. It was basically Arsenal bad, Spurs good. You know, Bale good, Party bad. Arteta bad, Jose good. Like it was literally that simple. And I was really put off by it because I thought, you know, they give us zero credit for being one of the best defenses in the league. On paper, we are. The fact that they have a really bad defense. I mean, their defense is not good. And the run of form that they've been on has been very short. It's a very small sample size and against teams that are not as good as us. Crystal Palace, Burnley, and Wolfsburg are not Arsenal quality. So I thought that was a little disappointing to hear that. I just thought that they would make it a little bit more balanced. But, you know, even a little bit further on, you know, the day of the game, you know, we got reports of, you know, Arteta leaving Aubameyang out of the squad or out of the starting lineup because of disciplinary issues. And again, the commentary was very, you know, against Arteta and his decision to drop Aubameyang. And, you know, for me, it's just kind of, I think I was more concerned about Arteta revealing the intricacies of the situation more than just like, okay, well, I'm okay with the disciplining of him. You know, maybe Arteta didn't have to say that it was disciplinary reasons. He could have just said, I just chose not to play him, but maybe there's a reason why he did that. I'm not sure. But Aubameyang, to me, like, that is just not how a captain behaves, like, especially on the day of a North London derby. I think this entire time we've been calling for equality when it comes to disciplining the players and these non-negotiables. And I don't think Arteta did anything but uphold that with this. I know he's the club captain. I know it was a big game, but I think that Arteta made a huge call, you know, making an example out of Aubameyang on a really big day. And for me, this answered some of my man management questions about Arteta, whether he was going to be able to be fair, treat the senior players similarly to the younger players. And so I just want to kind of throw the ball to you guys and just kind of ask you guys how you felt about the Aubameyang being dropped. I personally didn't have an issue with it. I thought it was perfectly fine. Harry, what did you think?
Well, firstly, with regards to him actually being late, I mean, it is unacceptable. I'm sure Aubameyang will have reasons, i.e. traffic or kids or something, which might make, it seem less of an excuse, but ultimately it's unacceptable. With regards to Arteta discussing it in the press, I do wonder if it was potentially leaked before. So I do wonder if Aubameyang said to someone in the press, "Oh no, I've been dropped," or if they've said, "Oh, why aren't you playing today?" He said, "Oh, I've been dropped for being late." So maybe Arteta had to come out and say it. In terms of the decision to actually drop him from the team, before the game, I was toying with Lacazette starting anyway. So from a tactical perspective, I wasn't that too concerned. And then from a disciplinary perspective, like you say, I just think it's about being consistent with your message to the players, especially when a captain isn't leading by example in that respect. And in terms of Aubameyang being that captain that we want, and we often criticise him for not being perhaps vocal enough or leading by example, it doesn't help when his timekeeping isn't up to standard. So I fully back Arteta. I know he's been questioned on whether he had to discuss it in the press. The truth is, if he didn't, it would have been leaked anyway. It would have got out and they would have pressed him and pressed him and pressed him. So for me, it's probably not a sensible thing, but at least there's no more questions being asked about why he was missing and how late he was. Essentially, Arteta gave his reasons, and Aubameyang, make no mistake, was absolutely livid. In his warm-up, he looked really unhappy. And even though he was wearing a face mask sitting in the stands, you could see his eyes were raging. And we're being told that he left straight after the game and didn't do his warm down with the subs. So as long as the disciplinary action stops and he's back in the squad for the next game or back in the team, I don't see it as an issue. And I think it's something that all the players can look at Arteta and say, this man means business.
I mean, Arteta did say that it's over now, so I don't think it will progress beyond this. And just, I don't know, I just think Aubameyang let the team down more than maybe the commentary stated. Like, Arteta was letting the team down, but make no mistake, Aubameyang let the team down. If we had not won that game and maybe Lacazette hadn't scored his goal or whatever, that would have been on Aubameyang for me and not on Arteta, because Aubameyang needs to hold up the standard of the team because he's the captain. What do you think, John? How did you feel about the Aubameyang being left out situation?
I was totally okay with it. I think that, it was, if it was just one thing, one instance, that's one thing. But there was evidence of him doing it multiple times. That this wasn't the first time that it happened. That he'd missed other aspects of and it was kind of mentioned that's not how a captain behaves. So when you look at a plurality of infractions, then it becomes an issue that needs to be dealt with. And it doesn't matter if it's a North London derby. It doesn't matter if it's a Europa League game in the group stages. That doesn't matter because we already topped the group. Arteta talked about these non-negotiables and clearly being on time and setting an example for younger players. This would have been the worst possible time to show up late. I don't care if it's traffic or whatever. You make sure you get there on time. You make sure that everything goes smoothly that day. And obviously some things happen and maybe there's some things out of your control. But, when you're looking at him as an icon for these younger players, there were talks of him being a legend at the club and setting an example. You can't miss a North London derby. You know what I mean? So whether it's the right decision, I think it is. I think it is for the reasons I stated, that it's ultimately on him to set an example, and it's on the manager to have certain lines in the sand that can't be crossed. As to whether he was upset and this notion that he left a little bit early, I don't think there's enough evidence right now to know whether he left or he was told that he can leave, because those are two different things. And given the interview happens, the press conference happens after the warm downs. And at that point, he was already like, it's water under the bridge. I imagine it wasn't like him leaving out of anger, because then I imagine it would have been a little bit of a different conversation from Arteta. I think this was just one of those things. He learned a lesson. He's going to move on. I think that it's a lesson that shouldn't have been had. And I think it was a very, very I don't want to say dangerous but yeah, I'm going to say dangerous move on Arteta's part. If we had lost today, I imagine that the narrative would have put that solely square on Arteta and the lack of Aubameyang playing. The fact that we won, I think, now makes this water under the bridge. But it's only water under the bridge in retrospect because we won. Mm-hmm. It was a very dangerous move on his part. He ended up doing I think it was the right move, dangerous one, and ended up working out because we won the game. Had we lost, it would have been a different conversation right now. And I personally would have felt the same way about dropping him, but I feel like there would have been a lot more scrutiny on Arteta. And now, instead, he comes out looking like the fair, stern, responsible manager, which is perfect. It worked out perfect. I can't complain about that. I think it's great. And Aubameyang can't complain about that because we won. He did the wrong thing, and now that's it. Now move on from there.
Is it problematic to have somebody wearing the armband that's not necessarily captain material? For me, growing up, watching Arsenal was about watching Patrick Vieira lead the team by example, like in reality, and I know that they say, well, Aubameyang leads by example on the field, but I personally don't believe that. I think he just scores goals like he's supposed to because he's a striker. I'm not behind the scenes, but for the most part, when different players and even, backroom staff or whoever, people in the know at Arsenal talk about the leadership behind the scenes. They talk about Xhaka, they talk about David Luiz. Aubameyang seems to me like he's a captain in theory, but not in reality. And even Lacazette to me has more leadership qualities than Aubameyang. So for me, it's problematic, to have somebody actually out there wearing the armband that's not a true captain. But I just kind of want to know from your guys' perspective, do you think it's okay to have leaders behind the scene and then just kind of have Aubameyang wear the armband, or do we need to shift that armband to somebody else and make somebody else the captain? Because we have at least 3 people in my mind, in Kieran Tierney, Granit Xhaka, and David Luiz, who are more likely captain material than Aubameyang. What do you think, Harry?
Yeah, I agree. I feel like we always used to hear Wenger say, that there needs to be more than one captain, or leadership is shown in different ways. So we've almost brought into that. But fundamentally, we always believe that a captain should be loud and vocal and almost aggressive and assertive. And we see that in Kieran Tierney. I think Aubameyang has the captaincy because simply Granit Xhaka could no longer have it. Bellerin was injured in and out of form. And Aubameyang just seemed the most experienced player. He'd been there for probably the longest out of the available potential captains. I do feel like it's something that needs to be discussed, but my fear would be changing it would cause even greater drama. You take it off Aubameyang, that's a real kick in the teeth. So personally, I would just keep it as it is. And whilst I totally agree with regards to Kieran Tierney, I'd also give a mention to Granit Xhaka. I think there's a reason why the players voted him as captain, because he is a leader. I think Bellerin is also a leader. I don't think he gets the credit he deserves in terms of his leadership qualities on the pitch. I think he is very vocal. But in all honesty, I would say don't change it just because of the potential backlash that it would be. And let's be real, Aubameyang's got 1-2 seasons at us max. So in a couple of seasons, someone like Kieran Tierney can make a step up and become that captain that we all identify with.
John, who would you like to see as captain of Arsenal Football Club moving forward? Maybe after Aubameyang is no longer here, or we move on from him as the captain.
That's a good question. Sorry, I had to switch to my phone. My computer just decided it wanted to restart itself, so I'm waiting for it to reboot. But
no problem.
To answer your question, I think I agree. I like Tierney as captain. I think that there's this notion. I like Aubameyang. I do like Aubameyang, and there is, like you said, a notion of leading by example on the pitch. But I never really got the feeling that I never really bought into Aubameyang as captain. At the time, it kind of made sense where we were, and like we needed to keep him, and like he was going to be this talismanic figure at the club. And if he had left, it would put us in a very difficult position from a PR standpoint and a footballing standpoint. He was almost like our, he starts having these interviews with Ian Wright, and this is nostalgic kind of warm, rose-colored glasses interviews, and you kind of buy into it because we really didn't have much else to hold on to at that point. But when you see a player like Tierney, who week in, week out, he embodies the just do it, get it done mentality. And I don't know what he's like behind the scenes, but I imagine I got the sense of what he's like, right? You can kind of almost understand what Tierney's like without actually having to know who he is. And I feel like he is that kind of a character that would be really good to have holding the armband. One that had a chance and that obviously didn't work out was Xhaka. I think Xhaka, from a mentality standpoint, and people are going to probably disagree with that left and right, but the guy is a leader by every account. By every manager that has ever managed Granit Xhaka has said that he's a leader. They remember Aubameyang and Xhaka were on the same team when the players initially picked Xhaka. We know how that turned out. Didn't turn out too well. I think that has eliminated any possibility for him, because I think that once you do treat the fans that way, whether it's an accident or not, you lose your ability, I think, to be captain material. You can't snap like that at the fans, regardless of how upset they were or what people said to you and your family or whatever. It just doesn't happen. He'll never be on that same plane again. But Tierney is a fan favorite. In the future, Saka, I think, is a good shout. There's nothing more romantic than a Hale End kid coming through and busting on the scene and making an immediate impact. Essentially holding games on his shoulder where we needed it. As a teenager, showing to be one of the best young talents in European football right now. And it would be a very romantic story for Saka to hold the armband at some point in the future. So that's what I would ultimately like to see. But I'm with everyone else. I think Tierney would be a good one.
I'm not sure if someone can clarify, but did Xhaka take the captain's armband when Lacazette went off yesterday?
He did.
He did. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but there's a difference between taking it when it goes off and you being the captain of the team. But you're 100% right. He did take the armband, and I'm surprised more people didn't pick up on that. I certainly did, because
they made sure that they mentioned it, especially like in U.S. commentary. Like it was mentioned, I think, as like he has the armband now. What's gonna happen? But I think it's important to have a leadership group. I think it was way too overly structured, before, where they were like, we need 5 people. But I do think it's important to have more than just one person that's leading the team. To me, that's really important, so we'll be at John back.
And we're back.
So I don't have a problem with it being multiple people, like it's David Luiz and Xhaka and Kieran Tierney or whatever, and I just think when it comes to Kieran Tierney, who I personally would like to see take the armband when Aubameyang doesn't have it anymore, I think it's just because he plays the way that all of us would envision ourselves playing if we had the talent for Arsenal Football Club. Like if we had that jersey on, that's who we think we'd be playing like, giving 110%, giving it to the other teams, that kind of thing, leading, really by example. And so go ahead.
One other thing, I don't mean to interrupt, but 100%. And not only that, just the kind of person like him with the Tesco bag is an example of that. It's someone that everyone could relate to. Right. And you have to remember, Arsenal Football Club used to be this working class thing that most European football did. It's only in the last, even 20, 30 years that the maybe less, that these like superstars started emerging. Right. And it's kind of hard to almost relate to those kind of players. Not saying that you can't and that they're not captain material, but there's something about that like working man thing that Tierney has going for him that's so identifiable for most people out there.
So I think if there was no emotional repercussions from changing the captaincy or taking it off of Aubameyang, I think Arteta would. I think Arteta's shown straight away that he's so aware of so many of the problems that we have in the club, whether it's the wage structure, the attitude, the playing style, inheriting the ethics of what it is to be an Arsenal player. So I think he's fully aware that Kieran Tierney could be captain. I think it's just a case of when the time is right and, not trying to upset too many things. Essentially, Arteta has, for want of a better word, probably pissed off quite a lot of players, who have moved on, and he's isolated players, who he doesn't see as part of his plan. So I think it's just a gradual thing. But we can all certainly see Kieran Tierney, wearing that captain's armband.
For sure.
He's also said that too, like in an interview, that Kieran Tierney does have all the qualities to be, an Arsenal captain in the future. But let's get into some of your guys' comments. Let me start up here. Arsenal Alex says Tierney should be captain for me. Arsenal Alex also says I would cash in on Aubameyang this summer.
Huh.
You know, that's an interesting conversation probably for international break. You know, international break is coming up, so maybe that's something that we can talk about then. Yo-Yo says Mustafi was given the armband this season despite reportedly having rejected a contract extension and being labeled a possible rat mole. That's an interesting point. I do think that that was strange to me when Mustafi did get the captain's armband. I think it was in a Europa League match. But I just think that Arteta liked Mustafi more than I think we liked him. So maybe he just got it just because he was the most senior on the pitch or something like that. But I don't think if certain other players had been out there, he would have gotten it, if that makes sense. Like in those Europa League matches, it was basically the kids plus Mustafi.
And I think there's a difference between like a game, like a captain that's there for a game versus the team captain, who, historically Arsenal captains have generally not even been on the pitch a lot of the time. You look at like your Vermaelens and, your even Arteta when he was doing his thing. So there. Yeah. Koscielny, even Mertesacker when he was, he was injured for a lot of the period that he was captain. So, there's a difference between the one who's just there on the match day in Europe versus the team captain.
Exactly. Enrico says Tierney should be the captain. Not only does he lead on the pitch, but off it as well by the way he conducts himself in training. He's a winner. I do agree with that. Arsenal Alex says that Partey has leadership qualities. I think that he has the ability to be a very solid, dependable player, a silent leader in ways, but not captain-like leadership qualities, if that makes sense. More of a Gilberto type than a Vieira type. He can be a nice Robin to the Batman of the captain, if that makes sense, Yeah,
of course. There's all different types of captains, isn't there?
Yeah, there is.
When you look at Liverpool, and the great thing about lockdown, or the only positive about lockdown and football during lockdown, is that you can hear what's being said on the pitch. And when you hear Jordan Henderson literally instructing every pass, praising every pass, encouraging, every mistake, that's what you want. You want someone who is just vocal throughout. It's really, really important. And sometimes we won't always gauge that. We won't see that from Mustafi, who, whilst he was dreadful, he was pretty vocal. And Granit Xhaka, whilst you can debate his quality, he's also very vocal. So fundamentally, whilst there are many different captains, when you're at a club during transition like we are and you're quite vulnerable, I think having a vocal captain is really, really important. Really important.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of vocal and Mustafi, did anyone see how vocal he was when he headed the ball in his own net this weekend? And he did that thing where
he had a nightmare, didn't he?
Yeah, and he was always he looks at everyone like, "What are you doing?" Oh wait, that was me. I just headed it. Oh, my bad.
He also tried to dribble out of the back and got it taken away, and then they scored. So I mean, he had an absolute nightmare of a game. But your problem now, not ours.
Yeah, and the only reason I mention it is because like being vocal isn't always good, like if I make a mistake and then I start screaming at you, like that's being vocal technically, but it's not captain material. So there is a distinction with the difference.
Very true. All right, let's talk a little bit about Arteta. So for me, this would be his biggest win, barring the FA Cup final, just because I think he had to take a huge risk by dropping Aubameyang, the club captain, trusting a lot of the kids as well in a huge game, and out coaching, a master tactician, whether he's now that coach or he was in the past. Mourinho is one of the elite level managers that are still around, and winning his first North London derby. For me, I think that this was the game that I've been waiting to happen to actually validate and solidify the progress that he's been making as a manager, not just the team, but Arteta, the manager, who's always been, the person that I've questioned, not him as a coach, because I know that he can get out on the training pitch and get them in the right formations and work them into the right positions and that kind of stuff. But the man management, the in-game management as well, I think he got a lot of it spot on, and he was very well prepared for this game. Arteta has now beaten all of the top managers in the Premier League. That includes Pep, Klopp, Rodgers, Ole, Bielsa, and Mourinho. And the only other manager that he hasn't beat up to this point is Tuchel, but that's because he hasn't played him yet.
Right.
So does this
I love represent that. But that's just because he hasn't played him yet. I like that.
Exactly. So does this represent progress for Arteta as a manager for you guys? I'll throw it to you, John.
Yeah, it does. It does. And it's hard to say whether this one was as important or more than the Chelsea match, because I think that Chelsea match was like the upturn from whence we came from, this team that was looking at relegation, arguably relegation at the time, and then immediately changed form, started becoming solidified. We start seeing what like an Arteta team might look like, and kind of like change the narrative. But in terms of performances, it was a very interesting match, right? And how important it was in terms of what you can, and whether you can kind of contextualize it within a framework of Arteta progressing as a manager. I think that when you look at this one, and when we look at this at the end of the season, I think that we're going to see that this was just as important. And the reason is, and this is what I was mentioning on another podcast. They were saying, okay, well, if you could win 5-0 at Olympiacos but lose to Spurs, was that good for you, or something like along those lines? And I can't. You can't lose a North London derby. It's just not a game that you lose, especially a Jose Mourinho North London derby. And like you said, whether he's past it, he probably is. It's a game that is difficult no matter what. You still have players like Harry Kane who love to score against us, and we were able to absolutely neutralize them. It wasn't just we beat Spurs on like a scrappy North London derby. We could have won by 4 goals. Emile Smith's Rowe goes in. That's a whole nother game right there. We didn't really make much mistakes up until the last 10 minutes, which is an aging thing. It's young players. I think Louise said it best. You have these young players who get really excited. We're about to win the North London derby. They start losing focus. That's going to come with just practice, which is why having a player like Louise in the side, I think, is so important for someone like Arteta, who knows that they have all these young players and learn how to manage a game. That's why having someone maybe like Mustafi wasn't a great idea, because if there's anything he can't do, it's manage a game. And I don't mean this to be like a Mustafi basking session. It's just, but to answer your question more succinctly, absolutely. I think that this shows progression as a manager. And when you look at his record against the top 6, that was our problem, right? We did decently against these like lower sides, but we always struggled against the top teams. We'd either draw or we'd lose. And when you look at Arteta, just look at Wenger's record against Mourinho. It's like 1 win and I don't even know. It's like over 10, right? It's something ridiculous. It's a very, very, very bad record, and that goes all the way back to his Chelsea days. And you can argue it's apples and oranges, but the point is that he's not a bad manager, and it's not a bad Spurs side, even though that they were pretty bad on the day. So that's kind of a roundabout way of answering your question. Ultimately, yes, I do think that it shows progression. Now the question is, can we keep replicating this kind of a performance? We have to, we have a little bit of a lifeline going into the Olympiacos game. We can just not crap the bed there, and then we just finish the season on a strong note. I mean, you don't beat these managers like Mourinho, like Klopp, like Pep by being lucky. You got to work hard, and you got to have a game plan, and you got to effectuate it perfectly. Like Arteta said, in certain games in the Premier League, you need to have a perfect game in order to win in certain games, especially like a Man City, a team like that. I know we didn't last time, but before that we did. So I'll count that.
You're muted, Jess.
Wow. Yes, I was. So Harry, I'm seeing in the comment section, and I was actually going to leave this towards the end, but let's go ahead and tackle it now, because I think this is a really important, topic to kind of cover. But, we're talking about Arteta, and we're talking about making progress. And I think the three of us, I may be, just assuming, but I think based on, we've spoken before, Harry, that we would all say that we're making progress. But Fergie's son is saying, do you see progress under Arteta really 10th? Arteta must win the Europa League, or if we fail to get top 6, that's being diluted. If your worst finish in 20 years plus is seen as progress. Yo-Yo says the result helped Arsenal move from 10th to 10th. The North London derby is inconsequential if the club fails in their main objectives. Harry, is there a chance that we can finish lower than we did last season and be closer to where we want to be?
Well, the frustrating thing is when you talk about progress, you can always refer to being 10th, and people see that as a way of showing that we haven't made progress. But progress can be measured in so many ways. We've got rid of so many bad players. We've reduced the wage bill. We've extended the contracts of players like Holding. And whilst you may not rate those players, you're protecting your investment. So when the market does rise back up, you have a player who we can sell for money. We are playing better football. We are more competitive against the top six, as you guys just mentioned. Unfortunately, that run of 7-8 games, where Arteta was almost a victim of his own principles, because he, felt like he had to drop Mesut, so he had to change the structure of the team. And for some reason, we couldn't translate that into good performances. So now, whatever run we go on, those 7-8 games that we lost early on in the season, they're always going to hold us back. And when you look at our form since the turn of the year, our form is pretty decent. I think we might maybe 6th or 7th in the form table. So it's not too bad. Of course, it's not where we should be. And if we're measuring progress and what we've done previously, then of course we're miles off. But the truth is, we are where we are. And in terms of progress, whilst it can't be seen physically in a league position, there's lots of factors to consider. And in terms of always referring to the league position, I would say that there are reasons for that. And I mentioned this on another show, and I hate to repeat it, but if you go for a job interview that's at 3 p.m. and you leave with 2 hours in time, knowing it's a 30-minute journey, but you leave your house at 1 p.m. and then the train station is closed, and then you get in an Uber to the job interview, but you get out of the Uber and you get hit by a car, you go to the hospital, you come back and you make the job interview 10 minutes late. You have all of these reasons for being late, but simply the recruiter can say, yes, but you're late. And you will say, yeah, but these are the reasons why I'm late. Please listen. But they'll say, no, but you're late. So, of course, we can always say, yes, but we're 10th. But we have many reasons for being in that league position. And I do feel we have progress. And I don't think we'll finish 10th for what it's worth. I think we'll climb the table. And I think we'll finish 7th, maybe 6th at a push. And then that would be signs of progress, along with a positive Europa League win, or Europa League Cup run, sorry.
Yeah, I think where I kind of stand here is I've been I like Arteta. So I'm putting my flag in the sand there. I like Arteta. I wanted to say I want him to be the right man for the job, because I think he wants to play football the right way. And he's the first manager. Well, we haven't had a lot of them, but for the latter ends of Arsene's reign and all of Unai Emery, there was no emphasis on trying to rebuild Arsenal from the ground up. When you rebuild something from the ground up, it's likely that things are going to get worse before they get better. Now, I'm not saying that, the results don't matter, but we all know that regardless, even when we came in 5th, we were way worse than I think we could have imagined. We've been in free fall for 5 years. And we've been slowly getting worse from the last time that we won the league, just slowly getting worse, until we went into free fall. So to think that we're going to unravel this knot so quickly is unrealistic, because we've been so poor for so long, and there's no foundation under this house at all. We have to build a foundation. When you do that, that means that you're going to go through a lot of bumps. You're going to go through a lot of bad shit. That's pretty much what I'm trying to say before you see good, sometimes. So sometimes it's 1 step forward, 3 steps back. The problem is that football is a results driven business, and Arteta is ultimately going to be, judged on where he gets in the league. I think that because the board is behind Arteta, not only because they believe in him, but because they put so much into it that they can't go back now, that we just have to hope that the results match up enough for the project to continue. That's pretty much my only thing, is that he can't be floundering in 10th again next season. I think next season is when we're really going to be judging him from the very start. We have to give him some grace because he came in with such a pile of shit on his desk. It was like they just dropped a pile of shit and said, hey, deal with this. So it's not like we can sit here and act like it wasn't a mess.
Right.
So for me, it's just not about right now. I think the optics of 10th place and potentially outside of Europe is bad? Yes, I do. I think it's bad for recruitment and club history and all that kind of stuff. But Arteta's not going to go anywhere. So we just have to hope that the progress that we are seeing will amount to results next season. Those 7 to 8 games that Harry talked about, they stunk up the place. I mean, without those, if we even win 2 of those games, we're talking about 6th place, something around there. So, I mean, when you think about it from that perspective, we're really not that far off in the grand scheme of what we're talking about. But John, I don't want to close you out of this, or I want to get your opinion on this as well.
I think those are excellent points, and I think that it was a very, very kind of astute way to break down what progress is and what progress isn't. And then I think that it's also good to look at the bigger picture, and you have to look at the context of things. And when you're looking at context, one thing that I wasn't really mentioned very much, and I don't see it getting mentioned too much. We had our main striker not scoring goals for half the season. And it was kind of unexplainable why that happened. And, you could say if that's Arteta's fault, then it's Arteta's fault. But if it's not Arteta's fault, and, it's just one of those things that happen in football where a player will drop out of form given like all the weird stuff that's going around with the world. And now we know with his family and things like that. I don't want to make excuses. The fact is that had our main striker been in the form that he was coming into the season, I think our position right now would have been a little bit better than it is. So I think that where we are now belies a little bit about what has actually been done at this club. And I think it was a great way to mention all of the things going on behind the scenes with the wages and the structures and the personnel changes, as well as kind of this overarching sense of accountability, which this club has lacked since even when Wenger was a manager. He was always protecting the players. Players weren't accountable. It was bad. And that was one of the main criticisms of Arsene Wenger's teams and this Arsenal team in general for a long time, was that players were not accountable. And we're starting to see that left and right. We're starting to see it with players like Guendouzi. We're starting to see it with players like Ozil. We're starting to see it with players like Aubameyang now. No one is safe from accountability. And that, I think, is absolutely essential if you want a successful team. Everyone needs to know, and this is not just in football. This is in life, in any kind of successful company or working environment. Even though there is a question of accountability in today's world, the reality is that on the inside there needs to be that accountability and that structure. If you make a mistake, you need to own up for it. You need to make sure that you figure out what you did wrong and how to fix it. That's a fundamental thing about progressing, and especially in sport, a team sport, where your decisions affect the decisions of the player next to you, in front of you, and behind you, unless you're a goalkeeper. But the point is yes, there needs to be that accountability, and that's another aspect of this progress. That yes, and just to piggyback on that point, in order to assess accountability, you necessarily need failure. If we just won everything, you can't address this underlying accountability issue, because it would have been great that we were winning everything, but I think that we would always fall back on our laurels, and it would always revert to the standard, which was if something went wrong, everyone just starts blaming each other, and nobody actually stands up and tries to fix it. So, So we need failure necessarily to progress in that regard, and that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, and it's not about accepting mediocrity. I have to say that phrase really frustrates me, and it's not about lowering our standards. It's just about acknowledging where we are as a club, and that's because maybe all those years ago when Wenger gave us 4th place and that wasn't good enough, maybe this is almost, well, hey, this is what you wanted and this is where you are. And in a game that lacks integrity and loyalty, isn't it great that as fans or our board can show exactly that to Arteta and give Arteta the chance to turn it around? And since that horrible run of form, we have in a way turned it around. So it's certainly not a reason to say, yes, but Emery was sacked for the same reasons, X, Y, Z, but we don't want Emery back. So it's not about that. Now it's about acknowledging the situation that we're in, taking into consideration the pandemic, which has clearly affected more teams than others. So it hasn't affected West Ham or Leicester, but it has affected us, Spurs, Liverpool, who also have a divine right for top 4 and for trophies. Nothing is guaranteed. So my thing would be just show a little bit of patience, And sometimes progress won't always be shown in league position. If you have a feeling that it's going in the right place, then believe that feeling and run with it, rather than simply saying, yes, but we sacked Emery for this reason, or yes, but we're 10th. I do believe, I've said this, I do believe Arteta will go on to be one of our most successful managers if backed. I really do believe that. I've never heard a manager spoken so highly of from fellow pundits and players. I really haven't, with someone with such little inexperience. And I don't think he would have left his comfort blanket at Man City to take on a project without backing. So I really believe, or I bloody hope, that Arteta can bring back the good times.
And just to kind of talk about that one point you made about how it's not reflected on league position, you just have to look at Liverpool. Look at Liverpool back in like right around the Skirtle days when Skirtle's running around in their defense and they're starting to rebuild. They were dealing with some of the same stuff. We were all laughing at them when they were holding hands celebrating a draw at
West Brom. West Brom it was,
yeah. We were all making fun of them, and look, they just kept their head down and kept doing their thing. And walking together or whatever they do over there, and so look at them. Well, not look at them now, but look at them last season and the season before. Like they were on this clear upturn before whatever horrible stuff has happened to that club now. But 100%, I think that you made a great point. And one other thing that you mentioned was this notion that we've already invested so much. One thing, the kind of devil's advocate argument. I don't want to get into this sunk cost fallacy, where if it's clear that this is not working, he is not the right person for this job, and we need someone else in order to progress, then I don't want to say, well, we've already invested all this time and effort and emotion and whatever into him, because it's the same reason why people sit on a slot machine all day. They think, oh, I just put in all this money in here, so it's going to pay out eventually. That's not necessarily the case. So you want to avoid that. But here, we're dealing with a case where there is progression, and it's not too late, and we are seeing positives. So stick with it. It's too early to say that he hasn't done the right thing. And I'm 100% with you. I don't think league position says anything about what we've done in terms of progression.
Exactly. You guys, we have about 45 people watching the show right now. And I think we're at about 10 likes. So unacceptable, you guys. Smash those likes. John and Harry dropping bombs on you guys. So yeah, let's continue on. So we talked about Arteta for a long time, but Arteta is such a good subject to talk about. No, it's perfectly fine. We're talking about a win,
I love the guy. I love the guy so much. I really do. I just love him. So it's really hard for me not to speak highly of him.
I mean, what else do you want from them? We did the deal at Olympiacos. We won the North London Derby. I mean, we're good right now. I'm enjoying football. Exactly.
So we came from behind again in this game. We dominated, pretty much the entire game. They had about one shot to our 10 in the first half, but we got undone by Lamela. So, I mean, I think what I was saying before the game was that if they were going to score a goal on us, I needed it to be a goal that was a good goal. And it was a worldie. It really was. Oof. I was feeling like I was going to throw up when he did this. I mean, it was an insane goal, but I don't think it was one of those types of goals where we could chalk it up to an individual error or lack of concentration. It was just one of those moments where the other team broke through and they scored a really good goal. And Tottenham is the type of team that can have very little chances, one or two chances, and bury both of them and do it consistently. So, when the goal happened, I didn't have that same sinking feeling that I had maybe like a month ago of this is it. Usually I'd be feeling like, okay, we're going to capitulate, but I thought the entire time that we would come back. So I don't know. This is the third game where we came back from behind to win. We did it against Leicester. We did it against Benfica. Now Tottenham. For you guys, does this represent a mentality shift for this group of players? This is a group that's been synonymous with uncoachable, weak mentality, can't finish their dinner. This time they did it, and they've been doing it recently quite a bit. What do you guys think about that? Is it a mentality shift for these guys? I mean, no individual errors either. How do you guys feel about it?
Mentality shift, we definitely had a difficulty coming back from being under. But if I recall, we did it fairly frequently with Emery, we would actually go a goal down and we'd actually fight our way back. And at the time, Emery was being praised for the same thing. So I don't know if I like that. I'd rather not go a goal down. If we could fix the mentality of actually scoring first and keeping a lead, that's kind of ideal, but that's kind of like an easy argument, right? So is there something, let me answer, is there something to be said about being able to go a goal down in a big match and come back? Yes. Yes, there is. It's something important to learn. And this uncoachable, I don't really attribute that uncoachableness to this side. I look at when that comment was made, it was a very different landscape in terms of who was in the squad. You had your Socrateses and your Mustafi. I really do not want to keep bashing Mustafi, but the reality is that that's one of the players that they were kind of talking about. Xhaka was one of the players they were talking about as well, which I think was nonsense at the time, but it is what it is. We don't have to get into that. But I think that, I think that there is a mentality of coming back. Yes. Is that the right one that we should have now? No. We should have one where we start off on the right foot and we don't go a goal down, but it's something that needs to be learned, especially with these young players, that if you go a goal down, it's not the end of the world. Put your head down, get your stuff done. Don't slump your shoulders. Don't, do all the stuff that we used to see at the end of the Wenger era where these players would just give up once they went a goal down and capitulate. So I think it's been a slow, steady rise towards that, even as a fan, not feeling like my life is over once we concede a goal, because we're never going to be able to come back from it. Now we know there's a precedent that if we go a goal down, we could breathe. And that's going to help when all the fans come back into the stadium, because the tension there was palpable every time we went a goal down. Now I imagine once the fans come back, I imagine it's going to be a little lessened because we know we can do it now.
Harry, what do you think? I mean, I do agree with John that we shouldn't be just going down. I mean, that's a Manchester United trait for sure. They go down because they don't have the right mentality from the beginning and try to come back. I do agree with John that we shouldn't try to that shouldn't become something that we kind of rest our laurels on. But I do see some progress in terms of the not giving up, factor. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the goal, sometimes you can't avoid the unexplainable, and that's what that goal was. It was just a crazy goal by Lamela. What impressed me most yesterday was our in-game intelligence, and I just felt like, even though in the first half we clearly dominated and we did hit the bar and created a few good chances, we never created a crazy amount of chances. And I think that's because we were always quite compact and we didn't leave ourselves in a vulnerable position. And what impressed me most was that at 1-0 down, because I think the players had played so well in that half and dominated possession, I don't think it affected their mental state, because they knew we should not be down here. Whereas when you make an individual mistake, that burden on your shoulder, whether it's Cedric or Xhaka, you can feel that pressure. You can hear the tweets being written. You can see the news articles. Whereas when that goal like the Lamela happens, you just probably go, Jesus, that was a good goal. Cool, let's go again. And for me, that's what that was yesterday. So obviously we'd all prefer not to concede, but how you react is so important. And it's great to get what you deserve from a game. And it's annoying that we didn't win 3-4, 4-1, because we should have. But I'm just glad that we didn't let a fluke goal, essentially, from, I must say, Eric Lamela, who I tweeted before he got sent off that he's one of the worst human beings I've ever watched. I absolutely despise him as a footballer. He's so dirty and niggly. And Jermaine Genius, who tried to justify in Match of the Day that, it's his first red card, but that's just pure luck. He knows exactly what he's doing. And I wouldn't be surprised if the referees spoke at halftime or VAR said, just so you know, Lamela's had a few little kickouts, which we haven't seen. So next foul, make sure he's booked. And then that little arm in the face on Kieran Tierney was the writing in the coffin. So, yeah, I've digressed a little bit, but I think it's great to see that we are now being rewarded for the good football that we're finally playing.
Yeah, for sure. And we will, I do want to talk about, the Kane incident and all that kind of stuff. We will talk about that in a minute, but I kind of want to move on to, some of the other good things that happened in this game. So for me, I mean, the best players on the pitch yesterday were 23, 22, 22, 19, and 20 years old. I mean, ever since some of these young players have come into the side, they've been absolutely immense for us. And I think we're seeing the beginning of the core of our team moving forward, which to me is really special and something to hold on to when we go through tough periods. You know, we go through tough periods, and I think we need something to just kind of look forward to. And the young players, to me, are exactly that. And that's not to shade David Luiz or Xhaka or Thomas Partey or Lacazette even, because they played well too. But when I think about the future, I'm just thinking, wow, like there's a bright future here with some of these young players. How bright is the future for Arsenal and these young players for you, Harry?
Listen, it's so bright, and it reminds me, you know, of the good times. They weren't necessarily Highland boys, but when we used to sign players like Freddie Ljungberg, you know, who was quite young, and we used to see these players come through with so much raw ability. And the great thing about them is they're so unpredictable. Doherty had an awful game yesterday. Not only because Emile Smith-Rowe was so good, but he simply didn't know what to do with Emile Smith-Rowe because it's all new. It's new to defenders. It's their first time playing against this kid. So no matter how many videos you watch of a player, when he's put in front of you, you're not sure how he's going to hurt you. And I think we can be so positive. And I know we talk about signing someone like Jack Grealish, who could be the missing piece in the jigsaw. What a wonderful player he will be. Emile Smith-Rowe is very, very similar to Jack Grealish. The way they carry the ball, the way they pass, the way they shoot, even his frame. And when you go back to Jack Grealish, when he first came through for Aston Villa, he was a very slight young man. You know, he was really skin and bones, and now he's really beefed up and you know, become a stocky player. So I really think that in Emile Smith-Rowe, we know how good Saka is, and it took me a while to sit with Emile Smith-Rowe. I must say, a few of my friends were telling me that this guy is going to be great, but I heard it with Nelson, I heard it with Willett. You know, you keep hearing it, but this kid has just got so much bravery on the ball. To take on a fullback repeatedly and not use any trickery, it's all about dribbling and manipulating your body and showing the defender the ball and then taking it away. Is Perez. You know, that's what Perez and Freddie Ljungberg used to do. It wasn't about skill. It was just about using the ball in the right place. And yeah, so many things to be positive about, which is another reason why I'm excited about this Arteta project.
I mean, so if you guys, I'm sure you guys follow Orbinho, right? He does all the awesome stats, Arsenal stats and Premier League stats, but you know, he had posted, I think it's a he, I don't know, but Orbinho posted that, you know, there for the minutes per chance created from open play in 2021, Smith-Rowe is at 51.6 minutes. Odegaard is at 53.7 minutes, and Tierney is at 63.2 minutes. And Emile Smith-Rowe yesterday created 4 chances, more than all the Spurs players put together. And he also had the best pass accuracy of any player in that game at 97%. Tierney's expected assists from the chances he's created is 4.2.
That's crazy.
That's mad, isn't it? John, how do you feel about the younger players on the team and their futures? And if you just want to kind of wax a little bit lyrical on them, and even maybe talk about Odegaard, because I mean, he was immense as well yesterday. Yeah,
and look, I remember in the Wenger era, people were always talking about and Wenger was always talking about the values of the club. And one of the sticks that was kind of used to beat him were, what are those values, right? Like, we keep hearing values and this and that, like, and it's all nice and philosophical and beautiful and poetic, but what the heck are our values? Having youth players come in and get regular minutes and shine and to progress in the first team is one of our values. It is clear now. That is one of the things that Arsenal Football Club pride themselves in. We have for a long time, and it's been one of the consistent things that have shown in this club year after year. It hasn't always worked out. You know, you look at the British core and things like that. You look at, you know, certain young players that it just didn't work out very well. But if there's one thing that you know when you come to play for Arsenal Football Club as a youngster, you're going to get a chance. And that cannot be understated enough, because yes, there's one thing to go out there and buy a finished product. And I think that in certain aspects, we need that going forward. And we're going to need certain areas of the pitch where there's a finished product. But the young players' impact on this season is almost immeasurable. You look at players like Saka, Emile Smith-Rowe, who basically, remember, before Emile Smith-Rowe came into the team, we were missing a vital area of the pitch and a kind of a creative outlet. We were not creating any chances. All of a sudden, this young kid bursts on the team, and the entire way that we play changes. Same thing with Saka. The kid is so talented. He plays on the right, he plays on the left, he's played in the midfield, he's played as a wing back, he's played as a left back, he's played like anywhere on the pitch, and then he'll do well. He's such an all-rounded, amazing player, and it's so lucky that we have this kid on the team. And you mentioned Odegaard. This is a 22-year-old who just named captain of the Norway national team. These are leaders now. And when you look at I think we have 6, and I include Tierney in this, but 6 captains, because Tierney was at one point briefly captain of Scotland. So there was, so there's that. Then you have Aubameyang, who's a captain of his national team. You have Xhaka, who's a captain of his national team. The list goes on. Point is that you have all these young players, even someone like Eddie Nketiah, who's not playing with us right now, who's captain the under-21s. We have a lot of talent, young talent on this team, right? Even away on loan, Guendouzi. You could say what you want about Guendouzi. He's now the captain of the France under-21s.
Saliba as well. I'm not giving up on him just yet.
No, but that's it. There's all this young talent around the squad to the point where it's hard to find out where they even fit in some cases. And there are certain things that we're dealing with that are not even football related with some of these, in the case of Guendouzi. So it's a very good position to be from a youth standpoint and looking into the future standpoint. Remember, this was always supposed to be a long-term goal or a long-term project. It was never going to be just a quick turnaround, and that was it. We wanted to change the way that this club, the trajectory. It wasn't looking good. We had inflated wages with players that weren't even playing and didn't give a crap about the club anymore. Now we have this young players who seem to really, really want to play for Arsenal. And we're bringing in loanees from other teams that may not have gotten a chance there, but are learning and loving to play for Arsenal. And I think signing someone like Odegaard on a permanent basis, it's a little too early to say, but I think the talent's there. And it would be very important for me to keep him because it's this overarching picture of these youth players that are getting a chance and taking it. And that's been the most exciting thing since Emery took over. Remember, the most exciting part of Emery's season was Saka's breakthrough, in my opinion, and Emile Smith-Rowe getting a chance here and there. And you even had Torreira doing his thing at the time, who was a young player for us. So definitely one of our values and something that's been on display in the last couple seasons, but specifically this season, and even more specifically, the second half of this season.
I completely agree. I think that Arsenal has always been about bringing through young, talented players. And that's something that I think has been missing in kind of these last 4 years or so. It's for a while, it was just Iwobi that had come from the academy. And then it was Maitland-Niles. Mm-hmm. And then it was just kind of this weird in between. And just imagine if we had not sold Iwobi, how long Saka would have been maybe in the under 23s, just sitting there. I always think, and thank Freddie Ljungberg for making it a priority to bring these players through and solidify them in that team before Arteta got there. In the last game that Freddie coached prior to Arteta becoming the manager, I think it was at Everton. It was that weird game where Ancelotti was on the other side. And, it was that weird game, and Smith-Rowe played, Willock played, Saka played, and obviously Smith-Rowe was sent to Huddersfield right after that. But he made it a point to say, you need to push through these players. This is where the gold is. Don't get caught up in these other players. And I think it was just Freddie was a part of, the era of Arsenal where young players were important. He was obviously there when Cesc got brought through. So I know he knows the value of good young talent, and obviously he coached for the under 23s and stuff. So I always thank him for this. I think we're more than blessed. I mean, what other teams do you know of that have more than one really good player? I mean, and this includes Willock, Ainsley Maitland-Niles, and Nketiah. I think, because they're not as good as Saka and Emile Smith-Rowe, it's kind of their level is almost exaggeratedly slow or low. You know what I mean? It's I don't even know if that's a word, but it's exaggerated. But they're good too.
When you say Freddie, do you mean bring him into the under 23s?
What I mean is that he made it a point to keep them in that team. And in the game that he was about to, leave and Arteta was going to take over, he made sure he started those kids, and he didn't have to do that.
Yeah. And just to add,
and he did coach them there at the under 23s.
Yeah, and I think a good honorable big mention needs to actually Emery in that regard, especially with Saka, because he gave him his first team chance in Europa League, and he was shining. He was one of our best players, so it's a good point.
Yeah, and sometimes
I think go ahead.
Sometimes as well, it's about honing in on those player relationships, and when you put 2 or 3 young players in who have all played with each other, naturally their chemistry is going to be on point. So it's so great that Emil Smith-Rowe, can see a Saka on the opposite wing. And even though they may not link up, but just to have 2 or 3 in there almost makes their transition easier. Sometimes when you play a young kid amongst 10 seasoned pros, it's a really daunting experience for them, and their quality has to be amazing to show what they can do. But right now, Emil Smith-Rowe is playing with no pressure. His pass completion yesterday was 97%. I mean, that is ridiculous. So to be that young and have that ball responsibility is just incredible. That's just one of the most important things. That when you hit the wide man, he keeps the ball, and then he's progressive, and then he takes on the fullback. And for that, you have to be good on the ball, and then you have to be confident. So yeah, just be so excited about these young players, because I know I am.
And look, we didn't even mention it. Tierney. I mean, like, this is you forget he's so young, but he's a kid.
Yeah,
and he
really is.
He's like, if we can secure his future at this club, him, Saka, Emil Smith-Rowe, I don't understand how you can see these young players and not be
excited,
hopeful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Kieran Tierney is our most creative player. I know he's not, but in terms of chance creation, he creates the most chances. And when you look at Gareth Bale yesterday, 0 take-ons, 0 crosses, 0 chances created. And yet when everyone was doing their predicted lineups, or their merged lineups, we could only get Saka and Partey, I believe. It was 8-9 Spurs players. And it showed you yesterday that, Tierney kept Bale so quiet. And not only did he keep him quiet, he then imposed his own attacking game. And that came from dominating possession. So, yeah, Tierney, Saka, Emil Smith-Rowe, Martinelli when he comes back into the fold. The future is incredibly bright.
Let's talk a little bit about this guy, though. I mean, he had an amazing game as well, and he is a part of that young group too. Gabriel, look at this goal line clearance here.
That's basically a goal. I celebrated that like a goal. I think it's as important as a goal, that clearance right there.
Me too.
That's 2 points.
In the clips after that, they showed him kind of like clapping and trying to spurt, get his team going after that. And I think he's also going to be really important for us. He's also only like 23 years old. Besides Kieran Tierney, one of the best pieces of business I think Arsenal has done in a long time. How long have we been asking for a defender like this?
A long time.
It's been a long time. And he's finally here. And I think it's good for him to play with David Luiz. I know that David Luiz comes with some shaky moments, but having the experience of David Luiz next to him and them being countrymen and all that kind of stuff, I think can only breed good results. I think them two together is a really good partnership for us, especially in the short term while Gabriel's trying to get used to the league and all that. But that was a vintage Gabriel performance yesterday. And he also had one against Olympiacos too. I think it was just getting over the COVID and all that kind of stuff was difficult for him. And once he got over that, I think Gabriel is one of my favorite players on the team right now, because I just think we've had such lackluster defensive options, and just having somebody who's the right physical type, the right technical quality, the right age, everything is very comforting for me. I don't know how you guys feel, but it's comforting for me seeing him back there.
Yep. Yeah, totally. And I think yesterday I tweeted, I wouldn't be surprised if Holden and Mari start, which kind of shows where we are in terms of central defenders. We have 4 good options. But ultimately, what Arteta showed now is that it's crunch time and every game is really important. And Gabriel and David Luiz at the moment are his first choice because of the things you just mentioned. Gabriel did have that little dip. I think when he came back in the FA Cup against Southampton, he was pretty rusty, but now he's grown into it. And yesterday, he was colossal. And when Harry Kane has such a quiet game, when Bale doesn't do anything, when Son doesn't do anything, I know Son got off injured. It's because from back to front, you are on it. And like you said, we've been screaming out for a good centre half for a long time. I really like Koscielny. I don't think we had the right profile of partner next to him. But Gabriel is certainly one of the best centre-back signings we've made in a long time. And he's a mean guy. You look at him.
That's the key.
I know he's got lovely teeth and his hair is always pristine, but he's a mean guy. He wants to get stuck in. And I almost enjoyed what Kane did to him in this weird way, because it didn't affect Gabriel one bit. It didn't affect him one bit. Some players would go absolutely flying off the pitch. So I like his meanness. And when you sign kids from Brazil who've grown up in a tough environment, then you're going to get a rough and ready player. So yeah, very good times with Gabriel.
Yeah, for sure. I 100% agree with that. So let's get on to Dirty Harry. Not you, Harry, but Dirty Harry. And I also want to talk about Lamela and the media. After the game, I think 90% of the commentary was the Rabona and how we didn't deserve the penalty, how Lamela shouldn't have got sent off, and absolutely nothing mentioned about this challenge here. What on earth is that?
That's
that
a
is
red card,
assault.
possibly.
That's assault. You do that out in the streets, that's a misdemeanor. Why did you guys? This is just ridiculous. I mean, Lamela on Tierney laid him out flat. I don't know how they didn't think that. I mean, that's a red card in itself. He got a second yellow, but that was a red card. And how on earth they could think that this is not a penalty. This man is out of control. I don't care ridiculous. If Lacazette, they were saying that it's all because of Lacazette, he hit the ball and it skewed off and all that kind of stuff, but you can't tackle somebody like that in the box. It was rash. And if that person in that jersey was named David Luiz, they wouldn't be complaining. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I mean, what do you guys think about it? I mean, I think it's just they didn't talk anything about like how good we played, the tactics from Arteta. It was all about how none of this should have happened. No penalty, no red card, and this was never mentioned. I'm frustrated by that. How did you guys feel after the game, hearing the commentary?
And then Jose Mourinho has the gall to go. The first thing that he says when they interview him is, are the refs going to do a post-match interview? No? Shame. That's what he said. And it was like, I get you want to play this narrative about the refs. Like, that's what he does, okay? But, I mean, at some point you have to accept reality. But for that rash challenge, here's the thing. It's a penalty because it's so reckless. Because it's so reckless, that's why it's a penalty. When you make a challenge that reckless, you run the risk of the player potentially mishitting the ball and going into your path, and in which case you're going to hurt that player potentially. That's why it's a penalty. All right. So this notion that it wasn't a penalty is almost like you're trying to. I don't even want to call it a rationalization, because at least with the rationalization, there's some acceptance of reality, but you kind of push it away. Be like, yeah, it was bad, but whatever, sour grapes, it's not that big a deal or something like this. Here it's like, that's not even a penalty. No, like that's a stone wall penalty every single day. If that's on anywhere else on the pitch, that's a yellow card. We've seen red cards given for less than that, so and guess what? I don't mean it as like a big part of my argument, but we're kind of due a good decision there, because I can imagine why that wouldn't be given, in the sense that we just get screwed somehow. And that's kind of what I thought was going to happen when they started looking at VAR. I was going to go, I don't know how they're going to get rid of this, but they're going to get rid of it somehow. I know that's what's going to happen. Yeah, exactly. Eugene's 100% right. He was in the air when he tackled him. It was ridiculous. And then Kane, and I mentioned this before, Kane is probably the top 3, if not top 2, dirtiest players in the Premier League over the last 5 seasons. And he gets away with it almost every single time. It's ridiculous. From those little things where he'll back up into a player as they're up in the air. Like, I played rugby. You can't even if you do that in rugby, it's a red card. He doesn't even get a yellow for it. He does it all the time. It's so dangerous. We've seen play, like, look at Debuchy. Remember, Debuchy basically killed his Arsenal career with that same kind of challenge. It is it's such a dangerous challenge and the fact that he gets away with it all the time. I know that's not what he did here. He did something even worse. Like you said, it's assault. I'm looking at that like it's not, maybe it's. I'm trying to come up with a justification from it, and my justification is like, because I play hockey sometimes, that like, oh, that's okay in hockey, that it doesn't really make, but you're wearing pads and you're wearing a mouth guard and a helmet. All right, if you elbow someone in the face at full speed, and what really makes this one bad, he's not even going for the ball. He's not even looking at it. When you see the run up to the ball, he's looking directly at Gabriel. This was. The only reason he did this was not to hip check him, like some people are saying, was to try to take him out of the game. And it was out of frustration, I think. It's already 74 minutes. There's 15 minutes left of the game. Everything else he did wasn't working because he was getting outclassed and totally put in Gabriel's pocket. This was out of frustration, maybe out of design, because Mourinho said to go in there and try to try to mess them up, because in the past Arsenal have been susceptible to that kind of physical bullying. And
well, Lamela went straight for just to kind of
Xhaka,
piggyback off of what you're saying. He went straight to Xhaka, and I tweeted right after the first time that they kind of got into it. Please, somebody tell Xhaka not to get into it with Lamela, because he was literally sent out there not to do anything but badger. He went to David Luiz too. He kicked out at him. I mean, it's a joke. They talk about how undisciplined our team is. Is that discipline?
No,
is that discipline? Is the only reason why it's not looked at like that is because they don't get called for it.
Right.
This is outside of the game. Yeah. This is outside of the game. This is not football anymore. Look at him. This is ridiculous. Like
it's just a prime example of someone abusing their power, and Harry Kane knows he'll get away with it.
Yeah,
he knows he'll get away with it, which is why he does it. Now, God forbid, and I don't want to sound too dramatic, but maybe it will take something really bad happening to a player when he does it for them to change. So now, if Gabriel was on the bar line and then he gets whacked into the advertising boards and he goes over and he goes into a fan or a photographer, then suddenly it becomes a much bigger issue. Or if there's an injury, then it becomes a thing. I just think it's really, really poor from Kane, because, we all know that your team are struggling in that game. But what you're doing is you are endangering an opponent. And I know football is about getting stuck in, about leaving your mark on a player and showing that you care. But by doing that, you're just showing that you've got all this power because you're England captain, and you're going to abuse it. And you're going to show the whole world you're going to abuse it. And worst of all, the pundits aren't going to pick up on it for that very same reason, because you're England captain. So it's just a pure case of arrogance, in my opinion, and I hate to say it, but Harry Kane is a sneaky little man, and he's frustrated because he knows what's happening to his career, and he knows what's happening at Spurs, and this will happen more and so this year, because he knows slowly but surely his peak years are falling away, and that is why he plays how he does sometimes, because
he hasn't won anything. He hasn't won anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head, man.
Sorry, and to go for the penalty as well.
No, all you. No, because you're making such a good point. I wanted to jump, but I want you to finish it.
Well, no, I was actually going to digress to the penalty quickly. It's all about perception, and perception in football is crazy. Sometimes when a player shoots and then he gets fouled, the notion is, well, he's already shot. Granit Xhaka got penalised on Son maybe 2 years ago when Son had a shot or a cross, and Granit Xhaka went to ground, and took him out. So the only way you make this not a penalty is if you're a Spurs fan and you come up with reasons for. And many Spurs fans I've heard say, look, I've not got my bias hat on, but it's not a penalty. I know you think you don't have your bias hat on, but you do, because the guy has jumped in the air to stop a shot, and he's hit Lacazette. So it's a penalty. And if it's David Luiz, I'm 95% sure that is a red card as well. 95% sure. 95% sure. I was calling out for a red card at the time. Then I was
apparently it's not, because he's going for the ball, and that's
the loophole.
Yeah, whatever. The bullshit loophole that never got called again. But I wanted to just touch on that point, because you made an excellent point that it's about frustration, I think, ultimately. And I think a lot of that game could be summed up with frustration. And it started from the get-go, I think, tactically, when Lamela is going around trying to foul everyone. That was his role there, to try to get Arsenal down to 10 men. And it's kind of ironic that he was actually the one that got sent off, and now they're down to 10 men. But it was clear that they did not come to play football. They came to play mind games and to try to win us on the counter, to beat us on the counter. And the evidence of that is the second they went down to 9 men, they couldn't do that anymore. And then you saw their best pattern of play came from when they realized, listen, we can't just be, jerks anymore. We actually have to go out and try to win the game and play football. And that is when they actually count. And that's why, and if you talk to Spurs fans, that's what they're so upset about with this performance. That and the way that they've been playing under Mourinho is that they haven't been playing football. They've been doing these weird negative tactics. Mm-hmm. And that's what he does. And it's very successful. But if you have a team that is not fazed by it, which one of the progressive things about Arsenal now is that we don't get bullied around anymore like we used to. It doesn't work. It breaks down and you look like an idiot. So I'm okay with that.
I think Spurs' intentions were to be slightly more positive, because I don't think he would have started that team. I think he would have played Sissoko instead. I think that they were his intentions, but from the minute one, because we dominated the ball, we took all the wind out of their sails, and also because we didn't play out from the back as much and invite pressure.
That was a lot of it, Harry.
They couldn't get up the pitch. And I just felt like psychologically that first 5 minutes, even though we didn't do anything amazing, because we dominated possession territorially and ability-wise, I think they thought, we can't press them, so we can't get involved in the game. So now we've just got 4 forwards on who are essentially totally ineffective. And I said at half-time, the worst thing they can do for us is bring on Sissoko, because then they'll start to get about in midfield. But they couldn't find Moura, they couldn't find Bale, because they couldn't get on the ball. Because a separate point, because Ndombele and Højbjerg, they're not as good as everyone thinks they are.
Right.
You know, they're
not. I don't think it's mutually exclusive, though. I think you're right. I think you're right in the sense that they got frustrated by the tactics, but I think there was also this sense of getting on the field to try to throw Arsenal off physically in the get-go, which is what Jess was kind of pointing out about how, the second Lamela came on, he started hassling Xhaka and hassling Luiz. Like, I think both of those things are true, in other words.
Yeah.
Totally.
I think that a lot of the focus of this game, especially for non-Arsenal, and maybe some Arsenal fans that don't like Arteta too much, is that the narrative will be that Spurs just didn't show up, but I think that, like Harry said, the tactics kind of didn't allow them to do what they wanted to do. And when they realized that this wasn't going to be an easy game and we were organized, we were not naive like we were the first time that we played them. We were quite naive in that game, and that we weren't going to just play out of the back and let them press us into making a mistake. They gave up. Let's call a spade a spade. We may have questionable mentality, but this Spurs side under Jose Mourinho also has a questionable mentality. I did a match preview with Abby Summers before the game, and she's a Spurs fan, and she was talking about how in the last couple of games, Jose Mourinho was way more positive than he had been in the past, because he could kind of see that the negative tactics weren't working. But, as much as I want to give him credit for that, I can't, because he wasn't playing against anybody. It was Wolfsburg, Crystal Palace, and Burnley. These are teams that if you have Bale, Kane, and Son on the field, you should be able to dominate them, period. We're a completely different animal. We have a tactical coach with a good young squad, and we're organized. So I think that he reverted back to his old ways because he knew he wasn't going to be able to outthink Arteta. He's very simple in the way that he thinks. He has no ability to be flexible, and he doesn't change his ways. And he got outdone. Arteta completely spanked him, and it is what it is. We have to give Arteta more credit. I know it's difficult because it's like, well, my narrative this entire time was Arteta's not the man for the job, but he might just be. But it may take a little bit longer than maybe we want, so we got to be patient. Good things come in time, That's
a good point. And I'm actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I kind of agree with both of you. I think that when I'm thinking about the game, I was always thinking that he kind of came out there to try to disrupt us. But, we definitely had the possession. That must have been frustrating to play against, especially coming off all this positive aura around Jose and the Spurs team. So maybe that was a reason why they did it. I don't know. It's an interesting concept. I think ultimately, though, getting those 3 points at the North London Derby is for these young players. Look at like your Emile Smith-Rowe, who, wasn't he like the youngest player to get that many chances created in the North London Derby since like Cesc Fabregas? Yeah. Like, what a stat! Like, so thank you, Jose Mourinho, for whatever tactics you did or didn't do, because we were able to exploit it and get the win at the end of the day.
Yeah. And also Mourinho in playing this attacking lineup, he's going against his football principles. He doesn't want to be doing that. He wants to play counterproductive, pragmatic football. Mm-hmm. But the reason why he changed it was because once they lost to West Ham, the knives were out for Jose. And he spent so long isolating his creative players in Dele Alli, and even go back to Eriksen, putting Eriksen in and out of the team. He made his bed. And his last port of call was like, I need to pull something out of the bag here. So let me play Lucas Moura in number 10. I don't watch a lot of Lucas Moura, but he's definitely not a number 10. And he's not even a second striker. He's just he's just a Brazilian Theo Walcott, maybe worse, in his peak.
And he was the best. He was probably the best player too. That's the funniest part.
Yeah, he was. Mourinho's made his bed. And the key is, after we've won the game, Mikel Arteta spent 90 seconds, 2 minutes speaking about Arsenal. Mourinho spent about 5 minutes making excuses and trying to brainwash everyone, which is the only reason why he got the job, because he did a great PR campaign. You saw him doing interviews, Paddy Power adverts on beIN Sports with Arsene Wenger, and we all thought, this guy is a nice man and he really knows his football. He's a dying breed of manager, and he's a Portuguese Sam Allardyce, and it's only 2 or 3 seasons, thank God, until all of those managers are phased out. Adam Pardew and Mark Hughes, honestly, it's a dying breed, and it doesn't work in the Premier League anymore.
I feel like Big Sam would have some offense there.
Maybe so. But I'm sorry, I dislike him.
Oh, I despise Jose Mourinho and just the fact that like I couldn't think of what's any way that I could hate Spurs anymore? And then they signed Jose Mourinho as their manager, and I go, well, there it is. We can never. I'll never take another North London derby loss ever, and that's why people were like, oh, someone mentioned, I think it was Yo-Yo in the chat mentioned, oh well, this wasn't a must-win game. I'm like, you can't lose a North London derby to Jose Mourinho. We cannot.
Not twice either.
We cannot twice.
This would have been 3 times this would have been 3 in a row.
Yeah, we can't. We have to win this game. We have to win this game.
You guys, let's do some questions. If you guys have questions for the guys, just, throw them out there. Make it obvious that it's a question. We'll do about 10-ish minutes of questions if you guys are okay with it. So we already have.
Thank you, Bearded Gooter.
Yeah, your guys' jackets are pretty bomb. I like them. So Yo-Yo asks, what does Pepe have to do to get his long overdue starting place after positively contributing again? Harry, do you want to answer this question?
I mean, what he has to do is be patient. He has to be patient. He needs to not accept, but fundamentally, it seems that Arteta wants to play with 2 number 10s or 2 possession-based midfielders, Emil Smith-Rowe and Ødegaard. So he has to adapt his game slightly when he plays on the left to show a bit more of an orthodox midfield role. And then when he does play on the right-hand side, he needs to be super prolific. Saka has set the benchmark really, really high. And it's just unfortunate. Sometimes it happens, at a club where one player just plays out of his skin and he keeps a new signing out of form. It's just that. It's not personal. And if you go back, maybe not the past couple of games, but Pepe has played a lot of minutes and he started a lot of Premier League games consecutively. But truth be told, he needs to be more consecutive. And if it's more competitive. And if it's between Pepe and Saka, I'm always going to start Saka over Pepe. So he needs to be patient, show the right attitude and desire, which he has done. I've seen the turnaround in his aura and his energy on the pitch. And he was great against Spurs yesterday. So this is what we want, guys. We want competitive places. We want good players being left on the bench. Back in the day, Wilton would be left on the bench. Sometimes Gilberto would be left on the bench for Pardew in central midfield. Kanu would be left on the bench. Sometimes Bergkamp would play right midfield because, he couldn't get a space up front. So it does happen. We had Keown and Kolo Touré and Sol Campbell all competing. Gal Clichy, Ashley Cole. It happens. This is what we want. So it's not about your personal love for a Martinelli or a Pepe. It's about what's best for the team. And when we win, we can't complain too much.
John, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I just want to add that his pass for Lacazette winning that penalty was one of the world's best passes I've seen in the season in anyone in the Premier League. That pass was unfreaking real.
It was.
And he played that with some pace as well. That was punched into Lacazette, which is probably why he couldn't control it properly because it was launched into him. But it had to be to break that space.
And you know what? I just want to say this really quick is I think fans are more upset about certain players not playing than the actual players themselves. Pepe looks like a happy bunny to me, and so does Martinelli. Mm-hmm. Every day I'm seeing something about Pepe and Martinelli not playing, but they look happy to me. I don't think that they have any issues with us building a squad. We need at least 15 to 16 players that can play, and rotate. And right now we have Saka, Emil Smith-Rowe that can play centrally or out wide, Willian, Pepe, and Martinelli. What are we upset about? Look at Manchester City, that is the standard. They don't play just a simple starting 11 and there's nobody else there. Look at Liverpool. What Liverpool is experiencing right now is what you guys are talking about. A starting 11 that never changes. It gets ran into the ground. That's with the fixture congestion, the amount of games that you play in a season. It's not sustainable. We need to have at least in those front positions, we need options. Pepe will get playing time. Don't worry about it. It's fine, you guys. It's going to be fine. Pepe is coming off of the bench like somebody who understands his role and is dedicated to being a part of the squad. And so the minute that he starts sulking again, then maybe we have a problem. But I think he knows what he's supposed to be doing, so I'm not worried about it. Next season is Pepe and Martinelli's season. I'm telling you that right now. They will get playing time next season because certain players will leave. I don't think Willian is going to have such a prominent role next season. It's going to be okay, you guys. I really think it's fine, you know.
I really don't think you can judge much on this season. I think being out of Europe is extremely important, but this summer is going to be extremely interesting to see what we do from a trading perspective.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that'll determine a lot. But I'm with Harry on this one. I think that it's a good thing that Pepe can't get a place, especially when he's played so well.
True. So Yo-Yo asked, would you prefer Arteta to face Jose again in Europe over 2 legs or in the final?
No, never. I don't want to play. I don't like playing him.
Harry and I were talking about this before we got on air, and the chances of us having to face one of our rivals or Unai Emery in, the latter stages of this Europa League, if we continue to do well in it, is very likely. And I think I'd rather take Unai Emery than have you to play Manchester United or Spurs at all in this Europa League. What do you think, John?
Would I rather play one of Manchester United or Spurs or Unai Emery? If we win, I don't care who we play. But listen. The thought of losing European title or honors to Jose Mourinho and Spurs or United are unfathomably horrific. So I cannot. I would rather lose. It's really a question of who would you rather lose to if it came down to it, because that's always the possibility. Who would I rather win? I'd rather beat Jose Mourinho and Spurs and knock them out to move on. I'd rather beat them, but you can always lose a game. And which one would I rather lose to? It would rather be Unai Emery, because I think there'd be a little bit of a romance there, and there'd be a lot of bad narrative about whatever Arteta versus Emery and all this crap. But at the end of the day, like I liked Emery. I don't think he was the right manager for us at the time, but I think he was always classy. He was always a good guy. He tried his best. It just wasn't the right place in the right time. I think Unai would relish Arteta in a final as well, but Arteta is 1 for 1 in finals, man. So who knows? I would like to see. I know that's ridiculous, but I'd obviously like to see an Arteta Unai final, because although I would like to take Spurs again. They were pretty easy. Yeah, I don't know the answer to the question.
I don't want to see Jose Mourinho's.
Me either.
His tactics, the one-off tactics are much different than league tactics.
The reason I say Emery, and this is my answer, I want to play Unai Emery because we'll actually see a game of football. I think it'll be less about negative kind of stuff going on. United just like to sit back and then try to win on a counter. Spurs apparently just like to WWE their way into victory. I think with Unai, we'll actually see some kind of football, which I would like.
I agree. I told Harry I don't think I'll survive Manchester United Arsenal final. No. My whole childhood is about us versus Manchester United, and as crap as I think that they are, and as big of a joke I think Ole is, I couldn't stomach it. I could not stomach it. And Jose and Kane and all that, So Unai Emery, if you want to get to the final, buddy, I would take you, But obviously we have to get to the final. Our next game is against Olympiacos. I expect to see some rotation. I expect to see us walk into the next round, considering that we have 3 away goals and, we're a much better team than them. And my match preview for that game will be tomorrow. No, Wednesday. No, tomorrow. It'll be tomorrow. So look out for it. And yeah, you guys, this is an awesome show. We're going to leave it there. John and Harry, thank you guys so much for being here. John, let everybody know where they can find you on the internet.
At 305cast. It's the Arsenal Miami podcast, even though I haven't done a podcast in forever. I should probably change the name at this point. But yeah, thanks for having me on. It's always a great chat, and it was nice to meet Harry. We haven't been on talking together, so it was definitely a great chat.
Harry, let everybody know where they can find you.
Yeah, firstly, likewise, John, and thank you, Jess, for having me on. Give me a follow on Twitter. It's DJ Harry. I mainly tweet during Arsenal games, positive Granit Xhaka narrative, so you have to be on board with the the Granit Xhaka bandwagon. But yeah, thanks for having me on, Jess. And it's great to speak to you after a win, because I feel like it's always after a defeat. So it's nice to celebrate Arsenal and not have to defend all players and,
exactly.
Good vibes.
Perfect. Well, you guys know you can follow me at It's Jessinho. Make sure that you subscribe to the Bearded Gooders channel as well as mine. I have my own channel, She Knows Arsenal, so subscribe there. We just got over 100 subscribers today, so thank you to everybody who retweeted that tweet and all that good stuff. And make sure that you like this video. And yeah, this will be up on audio platforms later on today or early tomorrow, so look out for that. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye, everyone.